and thanks for joining us today for this Living with Kidney Cancer webinar. My name's Mo Johnson, if you don't know me. I'm one of the health professionals for Kidney Cancer UK. Today we're going to have a conversation about working and kidney cancer. It's quite a topical subject, especially for people who've had a nephrectomy and are looking to go back to work, or people who are starting treatment or changing treatment. We have three speakers today. Ashley Scott is from the Beatson Cancer Charity Specialist Health and Work team. Darren Roberts and Elaine Boyd are both going to share their perspective from a patient's point of view or a relative's point of view about how their relationship developed with work during a diagnosis and during the subsequent kidney cancer journey. At the end, we'll take questions using the chat function or the question and answer box, or if you wish to speak at the end, raise your hand. So first of all, to put this into context, let's look at the kidney cancer journey of someone who has been diagnosed with localised kidney cancer, something that's confined in the kidney. It's a bit of a journey, really. First of all, there's a few routes to diagnosis. Some people have no symptoms at all and have some tests for something else and find out that they've got a tumour. Other people do have symptoms. And again, this is when people may need some time off work to have tests. This can lead to a diagnosis, which can be a really, really difficult time for people, and again, a critical time to engage with work and explain what's happening. And treatment in this case may be surgery or ablation or watching and waiting to see what happens to the tumour if it's small. All very key times for anxiety, for people feeling worried about these things. So again, it's just really important to keep engaging with work. And then there's this recovery period after surgery or ablation, getting better to get back to work if that's what works for you. There's a bit of a gap there, going from diagnosis and treatment across to the other side, which commonly there can be surveillance for 5 years, sometimes 10 years, 6 monthly, yearly, depending on your particular kidney cancer or your surgery, or indeed your consultant. And this can be a bit of a convoluted road and again can have some worries and may require some input from work. And then we go on to what we call survivorship, surviving and putting the kidney cancer behind you. However, in some cases, the journey is not quite so smooth. Some people at the onset are diagnosed with metastatic disease, kidney cancer that's moved beyond the kidney, or in some cases during the surveillance period, the growth can be picked up too. This involves then having a treatment plan with your consultant and medical team, and then treatment starts, and that may be oral medication, immunotherapy via an infusion, or radiotherapy, or sometimes even surgery. But throughout this journey, there can be changes of treatment and more changes of treatment. Some people choose to work throughout this journey, and some people at that stage decide to leave work. And this is why today we're having this webinar to discuss what these options are. The thing is about kidney cancer is people tell me that they feel fine in some cases, but also they look fine. And I think this is critical when engaging with work, or indeed family and friends as well. What's underneath? What are people experiencing, and how do we explain that to people to work out what is required at work? At the kind of surgical stage, there can be surgical scarring after surgery, ongoing fatigue, back pain, living with one kidney, and of course, anxiety, which most people know about. It's quite normal to feel worried when you're going to have a scan or you're waiting for the results. And underpinning this can be a lot of worry and anxiety and fear of recurrence. And those people who are on medication, and this diagram is by no means full. It could be filled with so many different things. Some people talk about having diarrhea because of treatment, which require frequent toilet breaks, loss of taste, sore mouth, like lack of appetite, and sore hands and feet. And this goes back to the idea of, having a support network whenever you're diagnosed with kidney cancer, living with kidney cancer. That can involve family, your medical team, the third sector, friends. Social connections too are really important, but also critically your work and work colleagues. We've talked a little bit about what a kidney cancer journey can look like. However, not everybody's journey looks like that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to watch a video from one of our guests, Darren.
Hi there, my name is Darren Roberts. I'm 53 years old and I work in the private sector, and I have cancer. I have kidney cancer, metastatic cancer, which is now incurable. So my back to work journey has been very disjointed. I started, my cancer journey started off in 2016, the end of 2016. It started off with bladder cancer, then it progressed to kidney cancer. And subsequently I've had spinal tumours, and now I have metastases in my chest. So my cancer is now incurable. But back at the beginning of my journey, when I first was diagnosed, I was very, very freaked out, obviously, but not just from a personal perspective. I think for me, it was, what am I going to do about my job? How am I going to cope? How am I going to pay my bills? What rights do I have? I'd heard horror stories about people being shelved as soon as, they mentioned cancer to their employer. And, I just didn't want to be that person. So I made sure that before I really got into it with the company, I obviously told them I had cancer, which came as a massive shock. I was the guy that used to run marathons. And I think when they all found out that I was sick, it came as a bit of a shock. I don't smoke, I don't drink, and then bang, I get bladder cancer. But, they needed to know, and I told them straight away. I didn't I didn't cover it in rubbish. I just told them straight out, I have cancer, and, the journey began. But what I made sure that I did was, I got straight on the phone. I wanted to find out about bladder cancer. I got hold of, the charity Fight Bladder Cancer. I spoke to Cancer Research. I spoke to Macmillan. I spoke to the Citizens Advice Bureau, just to make sure that I knew enough about, what my rights were in terms of, look, I know I'm going to be sick. I know I'm going to be off work for a while. I didn't know to what extent, but I figured if I could just find out, how I could represent myself. Of course, I had the protection from the business, but going in and sitting in front of people that you don't know who they are, what power they have over you, but knowing that I'd actually educated myself to a certain extent about, what I could do and what I could say and how I could represent myself was a great comfort to me, because it is a minefield at the beginning, when you're first diagnosed. Because if we're lucky enough, we have cancer once, it goes away. But, there is a time of, treatments and time off work. You have to essentially have time off work, and you have to have time off work for, going into hospital, having your treatment. You have to get better, and in an ideal world, that happens just the once. But like for me, it was very disjointed, and has continued to be since 2016, 2017 to the present day, of periods of time when I've actually managed to get back to work and then had to come off work and go back to work and come off work. And, this all has a massive impact. But, by finding out, from the third party charities, from support groups, and chatting, like I said, consistently chatting to people, finding out about, where it stood for me, helped me, like I said, navigate and through, the labyrinth of the mazes that are cancer and actually getting back to work. Also, when you are at work, there are concessions that can be made, but these can only be made if you communicate. And that's one thing that I've been very, when I was asked to speak about this, I think the one thing that I was very vocal about was the fact that I was able to, I felt confident enough, like I said, because I helped myself and I learned and I found out. But just sitting down and chatting to people and making sure that they were kept well informed all the time about my cancer journey, where I was at, what stages this was at. I know it's a very personal thing and some people find it difficult to talk about, but when it comes to an employer, we have protection. Employers can't just go, well, whatever. They have to listen, and if you are able to get back to work, they have to make concessions. And for me at the beginning, I think the biggest concession that my business had to make was allowing me to have toilet breaks. It might sound really one of those things that you don't really pay much attention to, but when you've got a renal cancer, you have to drink a lot of water, in recovery. You have to drink a lot of water anyway as a cancer patient, but an extraordinary amount of water, like a bloody dolphin. I was drinking water, like gallons of it, but having to go to the toilet all the time. But because I'd spoken to my boss about it, and because I'd let them know about it, they were equipped to be able to accommodate the space that I left with support so that the business wasn't affected. I think that's the most important thing. I think, if you're able to communicate, if you have that kind of relationship where you can go in and chat about things, then the journey just becomes that much easier. I think, going back to when I said about, educating myself, I think at the beginning when I had bladder cancer, I used to fight bladder cancer. I didn't realize that, until you have cancer, there are all of these groups around, these networks of people that will be able to support you. And then from that, obviously, I got the kidney cancer, speaking to Kidney Cancer UK, but also, Cancer Research have a brilliant support network. Macmillan, excellent. I've used them on many occasions. Even the Citizens Advice Bureau, I found were a great support. But, that for me, like I said, I just educated myself. I found out about the Disability at Work Act. Things I'd never in a million years thought I'd ever have to use, but were there to support me. And I think because I did all of this, the relationship between me and my employer was brilliant. Obviously I have cancer and it's not great and it's not going to end well, but because I communicated all the time and continue to communicate all the time, we're able to, if I do get back to work, make concessions for my return to work, whether it be reduced hours, whether it be that I need more toilet breaks, or actually having the facility to be able to take a rest every now and again. It's all there. Now, I know that that's not going to be the same for everyone. I work for a very big company and they can support me in that way. But I'm just a great believer in the fact that if you do communicate, you use that tool, use the fact that you can chat about your illness, because it enables the company to be able to adjust and accommodate. Also, educating yourself with all of the things that you would need to know empowers you. It certainly empowered me to be able to go and represent myself to the business about what was going on with me. And I think the experience that I've had, I've been very lucky up until this point. I'm still not back at work. I mean, the last time I was in work was December. So yeah, pretty much 12 months ago. But even during the time of COVID, I was at least once a month, just on the phone, just letting them know how my progress was, where I'm at, what they can expect going forward, because I guess there will come a time when, I have to have that conversation whether I am going to go back to work or I am going to go long-term sick. But again, because I'm able to communicate and talk to them all the time about, my journey, these are decisions that can be made down the road. So yeah, that's my back to work story. And I hope it helps. And I am available to have a chat with anybody that feels that they don't know what to do or wants to have a chat with me about it. I am available, and my email address will be made available after this workshop. So good luck.
Well, thank you very much to Darren for sharing that story and insight into working or negotiating with work when having with kidney cancer. I thought just now it would be quite good to do a little bit of a poll. Some of you who are in the audience here today may have had an nephrectomy already. So let's have a look at how long it took you to get back to work. So I'm going to launch the poll just now, and let's, fingers crossed, see if it works. And let's have a quick look at the results. Some people it was between 6 and 8 weeks. Some people, another two was 12 to 18 weeks. And one person for over 6 months, between 18 weeks and 24 weeks, and 8 and 12 weeks. So quite a variety there. So now let's go over to our speaker from the Beatson Cancer Charity Specialist Health and Work Team. Ashley Scott is one of their practitioners. So welcome to Ashley.
Hi everyone. I'm just going to share my screen. There we are. Hello everyone, welcome to this short presentation. Thank you so much Mo and Kidney Cancer UK for having us. My name is Ashley and I am one of the Specialist Health and Work practitioners at Beatson Cancer Charity. So the aim of this presentation is to provide a general outline of what a return to work can look like. We will also just touch on some of the issues that may arise and provide some insight. Planning a return to work is unique to the individual. What is important to one person may not be important to another. So let's pose the question of why is work so important to you? Often the first thing that we think of is money. It's financial motivation to return to that workplace. This can often be done too soon. Hopefully this presentation can give you a little bit of a food for thought on what can go into the planning a return to work and make it supportive to you. So these are some of the things that can be important to employment. So there's structure to your day. Thinking on what your daily routine is right now and what that consists of and the differences when you return to work and what your routine would be like there. It can often be helpful to write a list of what your working day would look like if you were to return, and it gives you an idea of where you may meet these limitations and the things that you may need to consider. Something as simple as a change of equipment in the workplace, maybe your office is moved, things like that. Knowing what to expect can make planning a return to work run a lot smoother. The social aspect of work is considered pretty important. Things are different at the moment with COVID restrictions. A lot of things are online as we are now. But something as simple as a coffee with a colleague, talking about your working week, that social aspect is missing when we're not in employment. Health and well-being and work go hand in hand. One affects the other. When we're thinking about why work is important, we're also thinking about a sense of self and an alternative focus. When you're on a long-term absence from work, going from that poll, it was really interesting to see where you're all at. A return to work can be an alternative focus to that everything's focused on health when you're off work, and having that sense of self and where you've built your career up to this point. And having that back and having control of that. So these are some common questions for people that use the Specialist Health and Work Service. Some of these may resonate with you, others may not. Feel free to put things into the Q&A and our practitioners would be happy to try their best to answer any queries. Just picking out a couple of there, Darren had put his presentation so well about finding out what your rights are and what you can ask for. The most uncommon query I've had is about formal letters coming from the employer, about asking about a formal absence review. Now this can be quite a scary letter. Terms and phrases on it are very standard, there's a lot of jargon in it, so hopefully we can clear some of this up. This is a very standard journey of a return to work. Everyone's return to work is completely different. We're looking to reach a conclusion about work in an informed and confident way. So right at the off, the most important thing to abide by is employer policy in the workplace. You may be familiar with the absence management policy through your HR department. Things such as having your sick notes up to date, understanding what your responsibilities are as an employee while absent from work can be really helpful. Having access to those policies, you may find that there's a lot of information there that will help you with your decision, so that you know that you're doing everything right by your side. So it's important to discuss work and a possible return to work with your health professional. Think about which health professional is you see most often, you have a good rapport with. Have you put the question of work on their radar? Letting your clinician team know you're planning to go back to work, can be really important. You can have that discussion with them to see what would help you at that time, especially when your employer may ask for an occupational health review. And we'll discuss what that means in just a second. Returning to the workplace, things to consider that people don't often think about is their routine. Getting back into that work routine, getting up a little bit earlier than you would normally when you're not working, gradually. Having a graded exposure, possibly a trial of the commute to the workplace, and find out if there's any problems you may occur while planning that. You may already be visiting colleagues and keeping in touch with colleagues. It's important to have contact with work. As Darren was saying, having that open communication really does help that process along. The most important thing to think is that you know your job best and you know what would help you. You know what your work looks like, your workspace, and you know what you need. So we're talking about a supportive approach to returning to work. So it's really important to access the local services that are available to you. ACAS can be very helpful if you don't have a union. If you're not part of a union, ACAS are really helpful in helping you understand your rights at work in specific situations. If you are a union member, make sure to make contact with them when you're planning to consult with your employer about a return to work. The goal is to make an informed choice by collecting all this information from different services and finding the support that you need. What is most important to you right now in preparation for your return to work? So let's go over quickly some jargon. The most common thing that gets confused is occupational health and occupational therapy and the differences between the two. Both are about promoting health and well-being. However, occupational therapy is a more hands-on approach about rehabilitation, ability to do everyday tasks, home adaptations, things like that, whereas occupational health, in terms of the workplace, is generally about risk management and ensuring you are safe at work. So the Equality Act 2010, this covers England, Scotland, Wales, and there's slightly different legislation in place for Northern Ireland. But under the Equality Act, if you have a long-term condition over 6 months, it is deemed a disability. If you don't resonate with that terminology, that's absolutely fine. We're just talking about in terms of legislation. Under the Equality Act, cancer is a protected characteristic. What this means for your employer is that they have a duty to consider reasonable adjustments in the workplace to allow you to return or to maintain in your current role that you have. The key word here is to consider. Things such as a slight alteration in your schedule at work, having a little bit of a later start, definitely facilitating a phased return to work, using your annual leave that you've accrued while you've been absent to facilitate a phased return so that you're not going straight back into working, for example, 4 days in a row, 7-hour shifts, or whatever it may be. It's really important that it's done in a staged way that is supportive to you so that you can review your own progress and have a chance to see what you need in the workplace. A formal absence review, as we said before, it's a formal interview with a formal meeting with your line manager normally, and a representative from HR. It's important to understand that when that letter comes to the door asking for your formal absence review, you can reschedule this until you have an appropriate person to come with you, for example, your union representative, and so that you have time to prepare the questions that you would want to ask your employer. It's good to keep a diary of events. When have you been to appointments? How is your daily routine going just now? How are you feeling generally? And thinking about what you need from your employer. It could be something as simple as a different chair in the workplace that is more supportive to you if you're experiencing back pain. Micro breaks are quite common to use to manage fatigue-like symptoms. Access to toilet facilities such as a disabled toilet. So continuing to think about the supportive approach to returning to work. I'm nearly done. Just a couple more slides after this, sorry. Communicating with your employer. From accessing the support, you'll now have the knowledge and confidence to communicate your needs to your employer. Some terms you may come across at this stage are occupational health, reasonable adjustments, and a phased return. Just as I was saying before, it's important to have this conversation about what adjustments you need in the workplace and what your phased return will look like, so you know what to expect. You may get referred to occupational health. This will be a health assessment, likely over the phone at the moment, about what your health needs are right now and what adjustments need to be made in the workplace. So some examples of phrases you could use to start that conversation with your employer. If you're struggling to build a rapport, if there have been difficulties in communication in the past, you could say something like, I have recently had a discussion with my healthcare professional. From that discussion, I have learned, and you may go on to say the things that you need. You have appointments coming up that you need to make them aware of, that you need to be able to go to. You could also ask quite directly, what support is available to me when I return to the office? It's important to know what you need when you're having this conversation. I would like to speak to HR about annual leave I have accrued so that I can plan my return to work. Being assertive is helpful to relay your needs across to your employer, and it shows that you've done a little bit of research, you've put a little bit of thought into this return to work, and you know what you need. It's about opening up the lines of communication between yourself and your employer. So going back to my arrow map, we're thinking of a hypothetical situation here that you've discussed your possible return to work with a healthcare professional. You've got the support to make an informed decision about work, and that might be reaching out to other agencies in your local area. And now you're able to have clear communication with your employer or your HR department. And it's in the hopes that you reach a conclusion about work that's informed and in a confident way. Sometimes this doesn't mean returning to your previous role. It's important to remember that meaningful work activity doesn't have to be that. It can be things like peer support groups, it can be volunteering, it may be a change of career. It's really about what you want from your working life and not what's expected of you. You can really shape that return to work in a supportive way. So thank you so much. If you have any questions, my colleagues Louise and Kirsty will be happy to help.
Thank you so much, Ashley. That was an amazing, informative and comprehensive talk. I've certainly learned a lot about the legislation and what is important about returning to work or staying in work at any point with this. And these are some really interesting questions that you have left us with, and we will go on to talk with your colleagues, Kirsty Henry and Louise Caldwell, along with Elaine. So let's go now on to talk to Elaine Boyd. As I've said earlier on, her and her husband have had a particularly convoluted journey over the last 18 months, which doesn't look anything like what I showed in the slides earlier on. And she's going to tell you what she's going to share with. So over to you, Elaine.
Thanks, Mo, and good afternoon, everyone. As Mo said, our journey hasn't been straightforward. I would probably say it's like a roller coaster journey since April 2019, when my husband was initially diagnosed with kidney cancer. Just to give you a flavour for it, in May 19, he had his kidney removed, and in August he started some immunotherapy treatment, and that ceased in November last year because he had a tumour in his adrenal gland. His adrenal gland was removed in January 2020, and in May he was diagnosed with a small tumour in his remaining kidney, which was moved by cryotherapy in July of this year. And just in November last month, we now have a diagnosis of an abnormality in a vein in his remaining kidney, which is undergoing investigation. So as Mo said, our journey certainly hasn't been straightforward, but really keen to share with you how that's impacted on both of us working and what we've actually done about that, and hopefully help some of you as well in your journeys. Just as a precursor to this, I think it's important to let you know that I've been used to Tom supporting me. I have cerebral palsy, and Tom has been very much helping me in my journey in my own employment. So this felt like a bit of a role reversal for me. To give you a flavour for what I do, I'm an accountant. I work in the public sector, unlike Darren, and I had actually been used to supporting colleagues returning to work after a cancer diagnosis. So I was aware of all the terms, anxiety, and the type of journey that we might be going on and the type of support that we might need. But I have to say it was really difficult to make the calls to both of our employers to tell them about Tom's diagnosis. The one thing that I would really like to share with you is that both of our employers said to me, "What can we do for you?" And I took that sentence literally, and being the geeky auditor that I am, I went away and thought about that and pulled together a list. But actually that helped me get prepared, and Darren referred to a lot of that in his own presentation as well. This is something that is very difficult to prepare for. We didn't expect this. Tom was age 54 at the time, fit and healthy, out working, carrying out a normal life, and all of a sudden things changed for us. So at work, I think the most important thing is to communicate, as Darren said, with your employer. And this is going to sound really cliched, but I did write out a list, and just like cancer, all of the things that I came up with began with a C, and it just helped me formulate some thoughts on how I was going to be able to deal with Tom's diagnosis and us both working. The first thing I would say that's really important is collaboration. Make sure that you work with your employer to see what works for you, what you really need. So the thing that was most important to me is that I supported Tom through his appointments. I missed his very first appointment when he got diagnosed, and we didn't know he was going to get a diagnosis that day, and that lives with me all the time. And I said I would never do that again. I wanted to be at all appointments. So really, to make that work, what I agreed with my employer was that I would work flexibly, and instead of going to the office every day, I could maybe work through virtual meetings. And actually it's worked for everyone, because I was the team expert in Microsoft Teams at the start of the pandemic, because I had actually been making quite a lot of use of this already. So they knew that attending appointments was extremely important for me. And as Darren said, it's not just about the initial communication, it's about having regular check-ins and feeling comfortable with the people you're speaking to. So it might be your line manager, it might be the HR department, it might just be a trusted colleague, and I would really encourage you to do that as well, if it is just a trusted colleague, to take along to other meetings as well, so that you feel that you've got support with you. Everyone else has mentioned in the presentation so far confidence, and I don't think you can take that far enough in terms of preparation. If you know what your rights are, and I have to say for both Tom and I, it hasn't been an issue. He works in the private sector in manufacturing, and I have to say his employer has been amazing as well as has mine, but I do fully appreciate that that isn't the case for everyone. And as Darren has said, and Ashley, you do have rights, and I would really encourage people to go and speak to the Beatson Citizens Advice Bureau and Kidney Cancer Scotland, but also the carers organisations as well. And as other presenters have mentioned today, the Equality Act very much fits in with cancer patients as well, and make sure that your employer is aware of that. Sometimes employers aren't aware of what the best thing might be for you, and it is a very individual journey. So I think it's really important you speak to them as an individual and not just what's written down in policies and procedures, if you're going to get the best outcome for everyone around. I'm also, if you want to call it, in a fortunate position that in work, I'm part of our Disability Confident Working Group as part of my own disability. So I was aware of the things that were around that could support us. Another area that is important, and most big organisations have this, is a carers policy. So you should know what you're entitled to in terms of being able to attend appointments or any special leave, which I was offered from my employer as well. Right away, they said to me that I could have leave whenever I needed it, and my team members were very supportive as well. I do appreciate, though, that this might be difficult for some people to go in and have these conversations. So if you don't feel you're up to it yourself, maybe take a friend or another family member that might be able to support you. The thing that I would say about myself, and I guess it's linked to my profession, is I'm a bit of a control freak. It's the auditor in me. So when I go along to appointments to support Tom, I always take notes. I always have questions prepared in advance. And it just helps me to be able to cope with the situation, knowing that I've thought about the eventualities and the outcomes that might be out there, or things that can maybe help both of us. The other areas that I would really encourage you to get in touch with, Kidney Cancer Scotland for sure has been an absolute lifeline, and Mo and her compassion, care, everything else, just being there to listen to us has been extremely important. But also, if you can, try and connect with other people in the group. We've got a family that we have connected strongly with and been on this journey, and sometimes it doesn't feel comfortable to go and speak to other family members or friends because you don't want to scare them or share your anxiety, but just having people that are going through similar situations is extremely important to us. And finally, I would say for both the kidney cancer patient and their carers, always be aware that there is counselling out there as well, whether it be through something like Maggie's or Kidney Cancer Scotland, or any of the Cancer Support Scotland, any of these organisations. And I would really encourage people, if you feel that you do need to get that, then take up that offer. And certainly Tom and I's employers have both given us offers of that. Haven't used it yet, but it's just reassuring to know it's been there. The last thing I would say around this is Tom and I have worked throughout this journey in the last 18 months. He's had some time off, and I was really interested in the poll earlier about the variations in how much time off you need. And what I would say in our journey so far, it's just depended on the treatment. Obviously the full nephrectomy took longer, but the cryotherapy wasn't as long, and it's important to listen to your body and do what's right for you and explain that to your employer as well. I'd be happy to take any questions at the end of this presentation or in the future. And if there's anyone who wants to contact me, if you want to do that through Kidney Cancer Scotland, then I'd be happy for you to do that. But thank you.
Again, Elaine, that was an amazing talk there. Thanks very much for sharing how you and Tom, managed to negotiate with both of your respective workplaces. I especially really like to hear how you adapted your way of working, so that you, even before the pandemic, so that you would be able to be with Tom at his appointments, but still, making sure that your responsibilities at work were being met, because, people who are diagnosed with kidney cancer, their jobs, it can be variable. People might have to have shifts that might need covered, or indeed be working on projects. So what we're going to do now, if it's okay with everybody, I hope you have enjoyed hearing our speakers so far, is we're going to have a question and answer session. So we're going to have Ashley Scott, we're going to have Louise Caldwell and Kirsty Hendry, all from the Beatson Cancer Centre Specialist Health and Work team. And just to note that that service is only available in the West of Scotland, but I will share details, and you all know of the different organisations that also help people at supporting at work, and hopefully Darren can join us, but if not, we will arrange something afterwards. Okie dokie. So let's see if I can ask all the panellists to come back on screen just now. So I will start with a question that I received earlier. Okay, let me just get this up on my email. So Someone has asked me about what their rights are around about redundancy. The person's employers are making redundancies at present, and this person is off sick because they've recently had a kidney removed due to the cancer. Could they make her redundant? Who would like to take that?
I'll take it. Hi everyone. Yes, they can, is the short answer, but they have to be careful to make sure that it's conveyed and that the process has been fair, and it's been diligent, and there's been no discrimination against the individual for having cancer. If they're in a union, I would suggest that they link the trade union, and the other thing I would suggest is they speak to ACAS. The employer themselves should also be bringing in the correct sort of support going through the redundancy processes. Well, first point, I would check out the ACAS website. Their helpline is also really useful, and be persistent when you're phoning them, because sometimes it can take a long time for the calls actually to get hooked up. It's just the sheer volume of stuff that's coming through just now.
Thank you very much for that answer, Louise. Let me find the next one. Of course, that'll be easier said than done, but I've got another note of it here. And I suppose this would have been for Darren, or if anybody else, any other attendee wants to answer this, that you could raise your hand and come and talk about this. This person wants to know, how do you make that difficult decision about when is the right time to go back to work? We saw in the poll, it can range, when you've had a nephrectomy from 4 to 6 weeks. Commonly it is 6 weeks for some people, and other people it could be 6 months or in between, really. So it's quite a difficult one to make up your mind, and that in itself can be quite stressful. Someone want to take that question?
From a practitioner point of view, I'd say it's obviously a very personal decision, and it's not something that you'd want to compare from one person to the next, even if they have had a similar procedure. But we all have our own physical and mental recovery rates, and those, as you said, can vary wildly. But the first thing to probably do is to discuss it with your medical team. They're the best people from a physical risk point of view to advise you on that. And then, like I think Elaine covered as well, just to make sure you keep in touch with your line manager throughout your experience, and they can discuss with you the possibilities for when you're ready to return to work, such as the phased return, making reasonable adjustments like changing the work environment, extra breaks, time off for appointments, and changes to work patterns. So for example, even starting earlier, finishing later, that kind of thing could help to make your mind up on if you're ready to return or give it a try. And having a sort of structured return to work plan in place can be quite reassuring, as well as along with a schedule of review with your line manager, just so that you have sort of these weekly check-ins to see how you're progressing, if there's any changes you need to make to your return to work plan and that kind of thing. It can all be quite reassuring. That's my dog, sorry guys.
One of our dogs, wasn't it?
At least it wasn't mine.
But yeah, that's the main things I'd say. It's totally thrown me off.
No, that's okay. It isn't interesting because we have been running a support group of people who've just had surgery or waiting for surgery or recovering from surgery. It is a common topic about when is the right time to go back to work, what is in place, and some people have had good long relationships with their employer, and that process is, I wouldn't say easy, but easier to talk to their employers and their colleagues about that. Whereas I would imagine for some people, if you've just started in a job, for instance, that must be quite difficult to negotiate these changes in the employer, because normally, for instance, you might not be paid sick pay if you've only been with your employer for a short time as well. So lots of really difficult things there. Does anybody else on the panel get anything to add?
I think if you've got occupational health, then they can be a really good source of support, and they can't tell managers to make reasonable adjustments, but they can sort of strongly suggest what could be made. And like Kirsty says, keep your clinical team involved and let them know that work's on the agenda. Sometimes assumptions are made rightly or wrongly. So let them know that you're thinking about work, or if there's any particular pressures from work as well.
Okay.
Nobody's, I think the rule of thumb is nobody's ever going to be 100% well. There's never going to be the right time to fully to be going back to work. So it's about pacing yourself and engaging in vocational rehabilitation activities and giving yourself the best possible chance of sustaining and being robust enough to sustain. And that includes looking after your mental health as well as the physical.
I suppose, well, we are recording this and people will be looking at this in the future. We are currently in a pandemic, which makes everything very difficult. A lot of people are working from home now, people who would never have worked at home before. And there's a message in the chat there from a teacher who initially, after developing metastatic disease, the employer was quite supportive, and they were going to go back to class in September, but not able to work at school because of the shielding in COVID. Able to teach online, but they're saying that they need her to be physically there, and I think this is really difficult, isn't it? Because teaching and nursing and other jobs, that they are expecting people to be there. What's the impact in changing contracts there, panel? How would that work if this person was asked to change their contract?
I think I would be, being a teacher, I'd be looking to engage with the union and seeing what they're saying. It won't just be cancer patients, it'll be people with lots of chronic conditions, immunosuppressed conditions, will be facing exactly the same circumstances. So I think it's worth engaging in the union and ask for a disability rights experts. So usually not so much your local shop stewards, they're helpful with some things, but I'd be asking for an area officer at that sort of level, because it's got to be union wide and it won't just be one-off circumstances. It's probably quite a common theme just now as well. And if it can be done collectively, it's got more parts to its elbow as well and less stigmatising.
Absolutely, and that's it really. It's reducing the stigma as well, but it's quite difficult during the pandemic because we hear of people being asked to shield. They were told initially to start to shield, and then later on in the pandemic there was some expectation to go back to work. So it's a very, very difficult time. I was wondering if any of the attendees wanted to ask any questions. If you want to raise your hands and let me know, and you can speak just now. So Elaine, you're actually asking to speak just now. Do you want to just quickly say something?
Yeah, I was just going to recommend to the lady that's the teacher that she doesn't agree to anything just now until she gets professional advice from her union, etc. And think about the Disability Confident Working Practices and the Equality Act as well there. Don't do anything in a hurried state, think it through, and definitely don't go with the suggestion right away. Sally, would you like to talk?
If I was to have to reduce my hours because I feel I can't maintain my work as it is there any rights with as far as how it affects my pension?
That's a really good question, Sally. Who would like to take that question?
What we would probably suggest is contact your pension provider and have them look at the different scenarios. Again, this is maybe something that union would be experienced in, but I think certainly in the first instance, contact your occupational pension provider and see what they're advising. They'll be able to look at different scenarios with you. Macmillan also have an excellent service called Financial Guides, and they would support you to look at financial products like pensions as well. Some places will allow a member of staff to temporarily reduce hours, and it'll be monitored, and they can then go back to their normally contracted hours when they've recuperated. So there's lots of different scenarios out there.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much.
And thank you for asking as well, because that actually tied into the last question as well. You know, thinking about going on a part-time contract, how that would impact pension too. So it doesn't look as if Darren is able to join us. So what I would like to do, first of all, is just check, are there any other questions? Elaine, you still get your hand up, or is it an artefact hand? That happens quite a lot. So if we don't have any other questions, what I'm going to do is share my screen just to show other organisations that can be involved in return to work. But also, once I've done that, we will have a chat. So we have heard from the Beatson Cancer Charity, who have this wonderful comprehensive service, and it's the west of Scotland only. But as mentioned by other speakers, Macmillan have a service. Maggie's are there to speak to as well, and sometimes run courses in Scotland. There's Healthy Work Lives, and of course the Citizens Advice also have a service there as well, and all the different individual unions that are involved. So I'd like to thank our speakers for joining us today, and all of you attendees who've joined today as well. I hope this talk was informative, and we will be having another webinar in the new year, and it would be really lovely to see you all then. So on behalf of Kidney Cancer UK, again, just a big thank you, and look out on our social media channels, and remember that we are always here to listen, inform and support. Thank you.